Ladies and gentlemen, we now come to the very last session of the conclave, a panel discussion on the big disruption leadership in the post-COVID world. It gives me great pleasure to welcome on the virtual dais Mr. Pati Singhania, President AIMA, Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, Co-Chairman NLC 2021, Mr. Sanjay Kirloskar, immediate past President AIMA, and Mr. Pranjal Sharma, Economic Analyst, Advisor and Writer and Author, India Automated. Many thanks for joining us for this session. It's a pleasure to have you all with us today, and a warm welcome to you all. Ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic has tested business leadership like nothing else, and the test has just become more severe. The second wave of COVID has brought back lockdowns, and the economic recovery faces fresh uncertainty. There are not enough vaccines to go around to restore a sense of safety and freedom. The churn in the global supply chains and trade flows is getting only stronger. Business leaders are also in the middle of a major technological upgrade of organizations and business models. In fact, it's a perfect storm. In this session, we will hear about how business leaders can reinvent themselves and their organizations for survival and growth. It is now my pleasure to invite Pranjal to conduct the session.
Thank you, Rekha, and good evening, everybody. It's the final session, but I think we'd like to pose the biggest question to the three very eminent business leaders of the country and, of course, of the world as well, in terms of the scale of operations that they have and the complexity of businesses that they run. I think the key question here, and I'm going to request all the leaders present here to address it, is while we've been talking about the challenges, mid-term, near-term to long-term, I think the sudden surge of COVID in the last few days, not even weeks, has caught everybody off guard, which means that while by mid-April we were looking at a fairly normal 2021, it looks like we may have to go back to our drawing board. So I'm going to request and all three of them to address this, that this is where real leadership comes through. How do you guide people out of a crisis? And can we rise above to see something far more positive which lies beyond that? So Harshi, I'd like to begin with your views on where we are and how should leaders like you guide us out of it.
Thanks, Pranjal, and a pleasure to be here on this panel. It's really a moving target. And I think well, we heard this a lot in this AIMA conference, but it is still true that we have to be very agile and responsive. So really, as a business leader, one has to respond, not react. Actually, that's the real issue, because we really don't know how things are going to play out. So this is, I think, one key thing that I think we all as business leaders have to keep reminding ourselves. At least I try to remind myself of that. The second is that, obviously, again, our first focus is our people, because people are the most important assets. So safety, security of people, families, etc., is paramount. So whether you can physically do, as we were talking, there physically may not be hospital beds, you may not be actually able to assist them entirely with medicine, but at least you can be there to support them emotionally, which is also very key. Another area where I think we need to understand is what can we do in our workplaces to accelerate vaccination. Now, I know that's not an immediate thing that you get vaccinated tomorrow and day after you're all fine, but we need to step up that, and we are, at least in our group, doing a lot of that, and we have a very large percentage of our people across the country vaccinated today. So that's all trying to help in some of these areas. But beyond this, we have to try and plan for how do we ensure that our supply chains work smoothly in a way. Pranjal, I think this lockdown, or call it shutdown or curfew, this is inevitable, because the whole spread has become really enormous. Now, whether the center sort of announces this or states do it is immaterial. And if from the front end, when you will have less consumption happening, is going to move backwards, and therefore is going to choke different parts of the chain. So whatever we learned from last time, how do we smoothen the impact and effect of this? Is, I think, as a business leader, that engages our attention. So there are many more things, but and of course, conservation of cash is another issue. But I'll pause here for the moment and let my friends also say some things.
Sure, thank you, Harji. Sunilji, the point is that, until again April, we thought that the worst is over, and with vaccination rollout, fastest 100 million vaccination in the world is a tremendous milestone for a country, for the world's largest populous democracy, which is federal in structure. And therefore, I often say that, India should not be compared to any country because in some ways we are incomparable. So I like to take that positive point of view. But the fact is that this surge has taught us that in the next 12 to 18 months, we may see more such surges happening through more such variants. In that situation, leadership will be tested very, very frequently. How can a person like you prepare for that?
So good point, by the way. So to the challenge first, we must realize that we have no specific unique advantage that we thought we do, either because of our weather conditions or living in unsanitary conditions or getting BCG injections. The impression earlier was that all of these things, or some of them, have caused us to be in a safer space than the rest of the world, and we are less prone to getting infected. Clearly, that's not the case. We have faced a very similar situation to what many, many other countries saw, especially countries with large populations, which saw second waves, and now some of them are seeing the third wave. So the reality is staring us in the face is that we are not immune. We have to take the precautions that we have been talking about from day one. There is no other option. Now, as more data gathers, as you know, this is a new disease. So we never really had enough hard data and information on this earlier. As we are seeing more and more come in, one thing is clear, it is mostly airborne. So all of the precautions that you can do to protect yourself from an airborne disease is absolutely essential. I think that's one message that we have to get across to our own companies, our supply chain partners, our families, colleagues and friends, and to civil society. So wearing a mask, in fact, wearing a double mask when you are in a place where you can't help but be around other people is probably one of the most important things that you can do for self-survival. Second is, of course, maintaining distance as much as possible, staying as much in open air, because closed room where air is recirculating is a high risk area. So I don't want to go into all of those because that's well known. All I'm saying is we need to figure out a way to follow those both voluntarily as also forced behavior where it's required. So whether it's penalties, etc., for COVID inappropriate behavior, both these things are necessary. The second thing that's important is for us to only send those to hospitals who have no option. Those who can be treated at home should be, as many other countries have been doing for months on end. In countries like the UK, for example, I'm told 9 out of 10 times if you call an ambulance at home, they will give you a paracetamol and tell you to stay at home. That's it, nothing else, no more medication even. You stay at home if you have a headache, if you have fever, take another Panadol or something. And that's what they're doing. Only extreme cases are being taken to hospital. And our system is currently highly stretched, very stressed, and it's causing the kind of upsurge which we know will not be manageable if these numbers climb up beyond where they are right now. So the same thing, and I'm not talking of behavior related only to the COVID. I'm not going to the business conversation. Maybe we can come back to that because that's another important part of what we as companies can do. The other thing is that we have to play a role as industry, as companies, as businesses, to stand shoulder to shoulder with government to try and accelerate the entire process of vaccinating the nation and creating community immunity as much as possible. There are now studies which show that the requirement may be as much as 75 to 80% of the population getting inoculated before you develop herd immunity. So that is a much larger number than we had earlier imagined. And as I said, we are learning new things every day. So we need to keep ourselves open to learning these, not to creating panic, and not to getting overexcited through WhatsApp messages, etc., which come each time there is some little bit that somebody talks about in even a private conversation.
That's a good point, and I think the point about planning for the future means that you have to be rooted in what is happening right now is important. Sanjay, to come to you, I think the question for somebody with in your group where you are across so many geographies and markets, the situation could be perhaps more confusing. So I want to also talk about the impact on business for a group like yours, because things are going up and down, and every market is seeing a surge at a different time. And therefore, the predictability that every entrepreneur and a business leader needs, perhaps that is not going to be visible in 2021. What then can somebody like you do and other business leaders do to navigate 2021?
Yeah, thank you, Pranjal, for having me this evening. We're now facing the second wave of the pandemic. And I think the first thing that we need to do, at least in India, the first thing that we need to do is all of us had established protocols last year, and those need to be very quickly implemented. It is sad that this has happened at a time, Pranjal, like you said, that we all felt that we could have a wonderful 21, 22, and just at the beginning of the year, just like towards the end of not the last year, but the previous year, everything went on to lockdown. And I still remember telling my board, we had our annual operating plan meeting on the 19th of March, and I said, I think we need to tear up a document and rework the entire document again. And so, I think it's a little premature to express what the impact of this wave will be, but I think it's best to be prepared for the worst. I don't know if even epidemiologists, I don't know the exact spelling of pronunciation of the word, but even whether they understand, the virus, the way it's mutating, and what needs to be done. So whether it's, like you said, it's going to be a steep up and a similar drop, I don't know what's going to happen. So as far as business over here is concerned, because, over here we have 65% of our business, and we're bringing back the protocols of last year. Already the number of people in the factories has been reduced, though they're still working. The offices are all closed. We have only our high-end computers running where we do design work. There's really no need to bring people back to the office. All of us have successfully worked from home last year, and I think the most important thing to do is keep our people safe, and therefore implement digital even more strongly than we had done last year. The second thing is, Mr. Singhania mentioned, look at our entire supply chain. That has to be, the integrity has to be maintained. Last year, we ensured, they have, like last year or the previous year, all of them stuck their necks out and delivered whatever needed to be delivered so that all of us could have a good year. And this is the time to ensure that they get paid their dues, which will come due or which has already come due based on payment terms. And because that we need to maintain regardless of anything else. Our plants, as you know, Pranjal, are all in rural India. We work with district administrations over there to support them in their activities. That has again started. Like Mr. Singhania mentioned, a large portion of our people are vaccinated. We've also tried to vaccinate families. We had a little problem in Devas because they said, no, they should not come to the plant. The families should not come to the plant. There are enough vaccination centers available. It's really too early or premature to understand what the impact on the supply chains is going to be. But I think the most important thing is we have to understand that there is a problem, because only then we will find a solution. Globally, it's been a wild ride. Fortunately, in every country, our business has been declared to be an essential service, and therefore all the plants are running. People outside India, I'm sorry to say, tend to be more disciplined. We've had very few cases. So the plants are running over there. The governments have supported us. Some countries have already had their second wave. I think England, where we have our largest plant, has already started reopening in some manner. So, we're trying to make sure that, the supply chain stays strong, people stay healthy, and whatever we can do to help the district administrations, because like I said, the plants are in rural India. Most of the times we are the only ones over there who can support them. So that will continue. So I'll stop over here.
Thank you. The question of business leadership, which Sunilji you mentioned, I want to place it to Harji as well. Harji, you've been also, all three of you have led industry associations. Today, what are the conversations going on in boardrooms in terms of planning? What are the challenges being flagged, and what are the opportunities which are being identified?
So, the conversation, as I mentioned, is a lot of how we can try in the best possible manner to do things in a quote unquote orderly way, which is not actually possible, to be frank. That's why I said we have to respond rather than react to situations. So the conversation is really about, as Sanjay also said, which I had also made my remarks about the supply chain, but also, going a little one step deeper. Last time what happened was that because there was a sudden lockdown, so one didn't know what the effect would be. And therefore, if you are a manufacturing facility, you sort of continued producing till you could, or till your raw material supply ran out, or you were not able to transport goods. This time, one wants to be a little more nuanced around this to say, okay, with different states, and this time it's not national. So there are different states that are more, in a way, there are more, if I may say, complications or moving parts, because different states are having different regulations at different timings. So you try and say, okay, keep your ears much closer to the ground to say how much of your produce is really being consumed. Where do we pick up the signals in terms of consumption levels are getting impacted? And therefore work backwards on your entire supply chain. Otherwise, you will produce and you will have inventory, and you will have monies blocked and things like that happening. And also, so try and be a little more orderly, if you will, on this. The second point is, of course, what local ground level, something that Sanjay said is very important, which we actually experienced last time around, because a lot of our manufacturing, or most of our manufacturing facilities, are also in the rural areas or in the far away non-urban areas. If we work with the local administration authorities, the district magistrate, etc., on both the health hygiene side as well as in the planning of people's side, it helps a lot. And they actually, because they are close to the ground, they understand things. Most of them do better. That is the other side. I think one of the challenges we are going to experience is where there are expansion plans already going on. So it is really, we have some of those. So the real challenge there is you can't stop work overnight. And as you know, a lot of the people who work on those are non-permanent, sort of quote-unquote migrant labor kind of people. So you've got to keep confidence going to say there are jobs, but along with safety norms, so you have to slow down the work, stagger the work a bit, and do all of that. But you want to prevent them from running en masse, just panicking and being scared. And Sunil made an important point overall, whether it's a society, whether as all of us, we should not panic, because I think there's much more panic. Anybody, like he said, and I just digress for a second, anybody who falls a little ill, obviously it is human psychology, but they panic and say, oh, is there a bed available? So I agree with him entirely that if we can do much more of the remote management, not just work from home, but take this away from metro cities to other towns to the extent we can at district levels, and get supplies of things going there. Easier said than done. That will help balance and alleviate things.
Let me take off from Pranjal. Let me take off from what Harsh is saying. Go back to business now in this part of the conversation. I think one of the things which we need to, it is a conversation on, but I think we need to push the pedal on this is use of technology, digitalization, and automation in our businesses. I think that's an absolutely essential requirement right now. Second is to build a tool of flexibility to plan for the unplanned, plan for the unimaginable. Literally, we used to say we have planned for a black swan event. Nobody had planned for this, by the way. I can tell you that for sure. I've had the conversation with over 1,000 companies now. None of us had a plan for this situation. So maybe in the future, we need to think about this. So one of the things we did, as you know, through our investment office, we invest in many other companies. We went back to each one of them and we said, you show us your cash flows, not the business plan. Please show us your cash flows as to how long you can last this business if your revenue comes down to 50% of what it is today and 0% of what it is today. You demonstrate to us how and what the business will do. And I think it's important for all of us to pressure test all of our businesses and companies in the future to ensure continuity, because many, many people depend on us. It's not just the business, it's the people. The knock-on effect is enormous. If any of these companies go down, we have never in India imagined the social impact for large job losses. And it can be profound on a country like ours. So it's important that we figure out a way to keep businesses going. And so it's two parts. One is in the immediate, and two, how do you take advantage of this downturn to actually do things which you otherwise could not do? I'll stop here and let Sanjay take on, because this is a very important part which not enough people think about.
So that's a great point, Sunil. I think it's really about stress testing and also forcing companies to plan for sailing in stormy seas. It's easier, of course, to sail in calm waters, even then people say there are challenges. But to say that you have to have your feet on the ground and know that every 3 months there could be a sudden crisis which is facing you, and are you prepared for that? So, Sanjay, to continue that, I think we're also in a situation that from last year where it was a shock, we are in a situation where we know the devil a little bit better. And we also know that the devil is likely to spring more surprises, in which case the point of Harshji that we can do things, even the chaos which is happening around us, manage it in a more orderly manner.
Yeah, I really don't know whether we know this beast.
A little bit better, I say.
We certainly don't know enough, let's just say.
Yeah, we don't know enough. And I think before I answer your question, I think one of the things that we need to do is also we need to consider what is happening around us. In the sense that in the last 4 decades, we've had HIV/AIDS, which is a retrovirus. We've had the SARS, we've had Ebola, we've had this now, COVID-19. What is causing this? What is causing these viruses to jump from animals to human beings? And is it our exploitation? Is it our mass consumption which leads to mass exploitation? I really don't know, because we have to ensure at least sustainability of our species, right? If nothing else. And so with that, let me make the other point that, yes, we need to ensure that our businesses are far better able to withstand the shocks. And one of the points that was made earlier was, how do you ensure you stay cash positive, right? You have to be on top of it. You have to ensure that you don't lose out as you are running your business, and you're able to run your business going forward. Every single entity in that business, I think, will have its own problems. How do you solve problems, whether in India or across the world? I think each of us is learning. What we need to do now is document it and ensure that everyone in the organization is aware of how certain problems are sorted out. I mean, we thought that we had come out of this problem, and now we are facing it again. Okay, the very fact that we still have kept the protocols and you are going to follow them, I think is going to be useful. On the other hand, usage of technology. You, Pranjal, are aware that 10 years ago, we introduced IoT-enabled pumps in our township, right? We tried to sell that device for the longest period of time, and very unsuccessful. Only Magarpatta city in Pune decided that they would allow us to deliver such a system, and they're very happy. The best part was in the last year when maintenance people could not go to their plants. People didn't know what was happening. There were very few people. Suddenly, a lot of people were interested. We have delivered a lot of such systems. We hope to deliver even more. So how do you ensure through the use of technology that your business keeps running? I think that's one of the things that boards need to consider and are considering.
I'll come to Sunilji for a minute and then go to Harshji. Sunilji, you mentioned investment, and I think that's the key question here. With this, and as an investor who has a portfolio across several industries, do you see an impact on the investment cycle? Do you see an impact on finance and capital being available?
I think from investment point of view, this is a tremendous time, by the way, for two reasons. One is availability of funding today is easier than it was. Cost of funding is lower than it was. Even if you look at companies have actually de-levered themselves very significantly. So balance sheets have become much healthier. So it's on both ends. The investor community, because there is money flowing in even from overseas, because India is one of the few countries left which has a positive return. Most countries, the returns are zero or negative. So we are attracting monies from outside. And also the domestic investor has become a little bit more adventurous and also are willing to take a little bit higher risk than they were earlier. It's actually quite counterintuitive. Normally in a risky situation, people tend to pull back. And you're seeing that in some sections of the economy. But in most, it's very interesting. Even the capex cycle, it appears, which has been slow now for, as you know, 12 or 14 quarters, it looks like companies are actually considering serious and significant capex commitments in their own existing businesses in the next few quarters, because they're saying this looks like it will turn around. What the last quarter showed us was the demand, the moment the people get comfortable, demand will come back and will come back with a vengeance almost. It has again slowed down a little bit for things like cars and commercial vehicles and two-wheelers. But to a large extent, demand has continued. And the belief is that this is a start of a long-term investment cycle, which will go on for the next decade or so.
Mr. Singhania, would you agree?
I would agree with what Sunil is saying, but with a slight nuance of caution, to the extent of only saying that, obviously it depends on which industry you are in. So let's break up investment from an investor investing, which is where Sunil is absolutely right. If you look at the long term, you're bound with given India's growth, you are likely to get very good returns. But if you come back into investment in businesses, in manufacturing, in assets or other stuff, anything, even service businesses that way, you have to see what is the sort of capacity. Now, if your business or your industry sector has pretty much got, closer to full capacity investments already made, so this is a good time to invest. But one has to believe in the long-term story. One has to also see issues around where your balance sheet is. It may be great to invest, but you've got to see balance sheet. But as Sunil said, that the good news is that a lot of people are delevered. But clearly, people who were suffering, who didn't have, in fact, are in difficulty, they are not going to invest. So this is an opportunity to invest, but one has to invest for a medium to long-term scenario and maybe be a little patient on returns at times, because we don't know how this will play out. One other quick point on investment is this will also be the opportunity for greater consolidation in businesses. And what has actually been happening, what we have seen from the last wave, is in a way that companies that were more advantageously placed. I don't want to say big get bigger alone, but yes, there is a truth to it, because if you were more advantageously placed in a business, you were able, and you had a better balance sheet, you were able to actually grow, also bounce back because of your supply chain integrity, as opposed to many others who were struggling to either get cash or to get their supply chains moving. So yes, there will be an advantage for such companies.
So this is a great debate actually, and Sanjay, I'd like your thoughts on this, because this is the decision that a business leader has to make about restructuring, letting some businesses go and to expand into new areas. The constant debate and choice between conserving cash versus investing for the future. The question then is, will 2021 see people investing more, or will they still wait for the next fiscal for perhaps calmer waters to take a bet?
It depends on each one's priorities and the way each one is made. Because some people like to take risks, some people would prefer not to take risks. I would, the last 1 year, we've been trying to ensure that we're sitting on cash, number one. Number two, sweat the assets, get more out of what you already have, and ensure that, the business keeps running more than anything else. So I think different people will make different decisions based on where they are. And who knows whether that's right or wrong.
But I think that's where that call.
I guess there is no right or wrong in this. As you said, Sanjay, it is going to be each one's situation. I think that is critical. That is important, that we all make the right decision based on where we are at that point in time. I think that's critical.
Can I make one here, Pranjal, on this very thing that on your question and what Sanjay said and Sunil said? I just want to mention one other thing. I think, one of the things as a business we need to understand is that investment does not mean that you necessarily invest in the same value chain and exactly the same manner as you did. So take Sanjay's example. He said he made these IoT pumps and he was sitting around. Now, which part, so I'm just taking that as an analogy, Sanjay, with your permission, that, which part of the pump business do you invest in? Is it going to be more capacity to make more pumps alone? Or is it going to be to say, I am going to invest much more on the services, the digital, the enableability?
Yeah.
Or if I may quote unquote say smartness of the pump. And maybe for companies, that is where we need to do more, because in goods manufacture, we have been much more, hardware oriented, the manufacture of goods. So really, I think a lot of investment has to come in digital, in services, in enabling customer experiences. How do you sort of hardwire the industry, your company internally, still delivering the same? So I think that one will have to be very conscious of how business models are changing. And Sunil talked about the digital change in a big way. And that means your model has to change.
Correct. Yeah. Can we spend, sorry, go ahead, Sanjay.
Yeah. So, Harsh, you've opened up a different topic altogether, or maybe it's the same topic. But for the last few years, actually, we've invested very little in capacity utilization, but we've put in a lot of money in, artificial intelligence. Okay. Now that investment is more like, I don't think it's capital expenditure, because you're spending on it year on year. We've put in money on 3D printing. We've put in money on augmented reality, virtual reality, to have a far better experience for our people, for when they are trained, to capture, to document knowledge from the minds of people. That back end is where we have invested, rather than in hardcore manufacturing. And the software that goes with, because, business models have changed. You see how much, a few years ago, we used to buy music on CD-ROMs. We used to buy movies on CDs. Now it's Netflix, Apple Store. The question that people like me have to consider is my manufacturing going to turn into a subscription business? And how do I prepare for that? And I have to ensure that I prepare for that, right? And I'm one of the, if I can be, how can I be one of the first ones to get there, to have the simplest system to offer? You know, what is changing in the background is all these technologies that are actually coming in, and how do you choose what is going to be, that is the real decision that today leaders have to make, that what is the technology that you bet on, and what is the technology that after you bet on, you get the best return before it turns obsolete. And, you know, you just ride that wave going forward. So, you know, that's, I think Sunil wants to say something. So
I don't know. I want to pivot the conversation from what you are saying, Sanjay. I think there are two, Pranjal, if you don't mind, I'm going to push this conversation in two different directions right now. One is our immediate problem of getting the vaccines up, available, and out there. What is it that needs to happen to that? Whether it's regulatory permissions, whether it's more manufacturing, whether it's availability of IP to, instead of having 2 plants, to have 20 plants manufacture. We have three plus 2 in the pipeline, as you know, vaccines. How do we get them off the ground? Second is to the point that both Harsh and Sanjay have made. How do you focus on people's reskilling and attitude in the new world today? And in the direction that we are going in, you will need a certain different attitude of people and a completely different skill level. So how do you focus on this at this moment alongside making other investment? Because this investment, unfortunately, in India has been seen as a cost and never as an investment by a business at large. I'm not talking of individual companies. Some companies do an amazing job of reskilling people. But by and large in India, investment in people skills is not very high.
So, you know, this is a great point. I was going to ask all of you about this. The agility that all of you have referred to is now seen a lot in policy making. You know, we seem to have some order as well. You know, 1st of March, it was vaccination was opened for the senior citizens, 1st of April for 45 plus, and from 1st of May for 18 plus. So there is an order there. And from just a day ago, the plan to allow private players to collaborate directly with state governments, to go directly to other private healthcare providers, the vaccine makers, it seems to me that the ecosystem has also changed into a far more collaborative approach than what we had seen. So clearly, that's a good takeaway.
Absolutely. Harsh?
Please go ahead, Harji, Sunilji.
No, I mean, you're right. I mean, in the sense that the ecosystem is changing, and along with that, we have to, as I said, respond with that. But one thing which I'm a little bit, again, coming back to the vaccine issue, is going to be, again, to what extent are we going to harness the digital ability? Because this order, what I read of it is that it is, you know, a lot of the 18 plus, for example, vaccination is actually going to be much more state oriented as opposed to center. Because center has clearly said that we're going to do our 45 plus program and this. So states have to, each individual state, how efficiently they manage the process. How do you register all these people? Where do you get them vaccinated and so on and so forth? So that each state's ecosystem, I mean, it's not that states are not digitally savvy. I think they have, within the last 2 years, they have progressed a lot. But that is going to be a key determinant of success. So we might initially see, if I may say, a little bit of patchy things happening, some places doing it better than the others, like program. I mean, that's probably true. But
there is no right or wrong, Mr. Singhania, because, you know, this is a classical debate whether, you know, if you centralize everything, people will criticize. If you give it to the states, then you say the center has abdicated, its responsibility. So, you know, you will have two schools of thought on this anyway, and it could apply to an enterprise as well, whether it's completely run by the CEO or are the, you know, regional heads running the company. So, but the larger question is of collaboration, a change in mindset where industry and government work far deeper together for a social objective.
Yeah, I think we have a big responsibility to play in this. How does industry put their best foot forward? And by the way, the state machinery is what was already being used. Even though center was driving it, please remember the delivery was already through the state machinery. So that doesn't change much. And incidentally, Harsh, for your information, the backend is still available. The app of the central government is still available to all the states to use. So actually, the change is not a lot. It's just that you have the ability to have a dispersed decision making to accelerate the process. And this is what we've all been asking for, by the way.
Yeah, which is a positive thing.
Yes.
No, I don't mean to criticize it. I'm only saying that the engagement level has to be much more there. And we have to see, that's why I said in the beginning also that we have to work with our local people, local authorities to actually see that it is effective and on the ground.
Sanjay, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, and one more thing I wanted to say was I hope that our, this is a problem that affects India. And I hope our politicians, all of them, speak in a united voice because, we have a controversy in Maharashtra about medicines that were kept for some other state and all that. I think it's time to move beyond that. And whether it's state or local politicians, they have to understand that it's the lives of millions of people that are at stake and we have to work together. And I believe as industry, we are ready to work with government, but we should not get any conflicting signals.
I'm not sure that's a certainty, by the way, in a democracy like ours, Sanjay. Yeah. We have to be realistic because of the kind of politics we have in India. You may get some broad alignment, but to have 100% unanimity, I would imagine is not possible in our system. So part of it, as you said, we should try and encourage as many of them to think alike or at least speak a similar language. But otherwise, we should also be mentally prepared. It's not going to happen 100%.
I think what is required is constructive criticism rather than blame game because, that's where it goes down, it's a downward spiral rather than improving and elevating the entire system that we have. But, we have just...
Munjal, that's, by the way, there was the most critical word you used right now. We have to be very careful to avoid the blame game. Otherwise, it's going to a negative downward spiral rather than fixing any of our issues and problems. And there are plenty to fix right now. But I think we are all, the direction is right. We need to accelerate the process in many, many areas.
Yeah.
So if I were to close the session, we just have a minute left. I think net, the sense I get is there is a higher sense because we've been through difficult times in the last few months, but we know that we are better prepared and at least we are mentally prepared to manage a crisis, even if it happens again in the next 3 months, which perhaps had caught us by surprise. So would you all agree that we are better placed and better mentally prepared to manage what lies ahead?
Quite. Despite the problem being more complex this time, the numbers being larger, the spread being faster, I think it's taken less time to come to grips with it. And the response both at the local level in states and the central government has been quite good actually. And by the way, the problem is by no means over. So we have to be aware that there's a lot to do, but at least there is thinking in the right direction and action in the right direction.
Absolutely.
I would also agree with that. I think we should be optimistic. I think we will be able to get over this. We just should not let our guard down. That's all.
Absolutely.
If I may just add one last point, I think the continuity of communication is very essential. See, we also have to
quality communication, Harsh, not the strange WhatsApp messages that go around and scare people or excite people.
What I mean is that we also as a society have to realize that we have to be responsible. So it's not, gatherings and other things are not just by government fiat. We have to understand that, look, there is danger if you do this, even if it doesn't seem so visible. So how is that message communicated? Business, government put together, society. So we all become aware, and that's all.
I think I'll close on this point. We have run out of time. I think what we can say for sure is that there are several battles that lie ahead of us in this year and the next year. a lot of things that we can anticipate and much that we cannot possibly anticipate right now. But what is clear is that we are better prepared for a more coordinated and a collaborative approach to take these battles on. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.